everyone. I'm Dr. Rayan Couls. I'm a professor of management and entrepreneurship at University of Connecticut, and I'm also the founder and chief scientist at Daigle Labs. I'm excited to talk with you all today about how social capital can influence and facilitate business founding and business growth. So let's get into it. There's a couple of types of capital: financial capital, human capital, and also social capital. You've probably heard of the first two, financial capital, and I would lump fixed capital into that, right? So that's how many dollar bills do you have? Or how many assets do you have? The second is human capital, and that's about, right, your brain. What do you know? It's also about your body. What are your skills? What can you do and what do you know? The third type of capital that's less known, that we're less familiar with, is social capital. And social capital is about your ability to get resources out of your social network. And your ability to do that depends fundamentally on two things: the structure of your social network, and two, your reputation within your social network. So I want to start with structure of your social network. Now, your social network consists of everybody you know, but also everybody that knows you. And that may sound like the same thing at first glance, but it's actually different, right? Many of us aren't aware of a number of people who may know us, but we don't know them. So again, your social network is everybody that you know, but also everybody that knows you. And I think that last piece is, again, more important today in a world of social media than it was in the past. So going from there, there's a couple of aspects of social network structure that I want to focus on: size, density, diversity, and then I want to talk about the idea of structural holes and brokers. So, a social network, when we look at how it's structured, typically we as social scientists will first look at its size, and that's just how many people are in your social network. And what we found in our research is that people with bigger social networks are generally more creative and better at spotting new business opportunities. You see, social networks are like, you could say, circuits or wires, right? Energy flows through wires to different devices. And social networks are almost like wiring or circuits for the flow of information. And when you have a larger social network, that means you have more novel information flowing your way from different sources, which allows you to be aware of more business opportunities than people like you, but with smaller social networks. It also gives you more information to be creative with. You see, creativity and your ability to produce an innovation, it's a lot like Lego sets. If you have 5 pieces of Legos and someone asks you to build a house, but the person you're competing against has 1,000 pieces of Legos to build a house with, who is likely to build a really cool house out of Legos? So the more novel information you have flowing your way from your social network, the more creative you're going to be, because you've got more novel information. Okay, so that's size. The other piece we look at is how dense or sparse a social network is. And that refers to, if we take everybody in your social network, how many of them know one another? And a more dense social network is when more and more of the people in your social network also know each other. On the other end of the spectrum, a more sparse social network means that fewer people in your social network know one another. A more sparse social network means that the novel information flowing to you from different people in your social network will increase. A dense social network means that you're going to have less novel information flowing your way. It's going to be more redundant, right? Because if everybody in your social network knows one another, then you are all less likely to be exposed to new things that everybody doesn't already know. Now, this is where you can have a double-edged sword in terms of business. So we talked about a positive of a large and sparse network is you're more likely to have novel business opportunities come your way, so you know where you can grow. You're more likely to receive novel information that can help you with innovating within your company. But when you have a very sparse social network, it's really hard, or it's harder, to group and bring people together into a team to execute something, right? And that's where I say it's kind of a double-edged sword. But it's also tough in another way. When we think about diffusing a new product, right? You want it to diffuse to a lot of customers. The more customers your product or service can diffuse to, the bigger you're going to grow in terms of sales. If you have a dense social network, you're going to hit network closure really quickly and not be able to diffuse or scale your product to a wide number of customers. If you have a sparse social network, you're not going to hit network closure as quickly, and you're going to be able to extend the reach and diffusion and adoption of your product and service. So in this aspect, when we think about social network structure and we lay it on top of phases of business development and growth, sparse or dense social networks can be useful or not useful at different phases. So let's think about it this way. During the discovery and innovation development phase of a business venture, a sparse social network is going to be really useful, right? Because you're going to be aware of more novel business opportunities. You're going to have more novel information to play with to develop that innovation, that product and service. But then as you shift towards the delivery phase, production and delivery, a dense social network is going to be better, because when everybody knows one another, it'll be easy for them to want to team up together. It'll be easy for you to bring that team together, and it'll be easy for them to coordinate together effectively because they all know one another really well. And so you'll be faster in that production and delivery phase than someone who is working with a very sparse social network. Third phase, when it comes to actually offering your product or service in the marketplace, and that's about diffusing that product or service through a wide array of customers. Once again, those with a sparse social network are probably going to have an advantage because they will be able to get that product or service to a wider number of people. They're going to hit network closure more slowly than someone with a dense social network. So you're probably saying, well, geez, how can I have the advantages of both? And the answer is you can. It starts with you being aware of the structure of your social network. Is it more dense or is it more sparse? And then if you can identify just one or two people in your social network who has a structure that is opposite of yours, you can start to take advantage of both. So, for example, if I have a very dense social network, I would want to try to identify the one or two people in that dense social network that have a very sparse social network. And if I can just get that person to team up with me, then I'll be able to take advantage of having a sparse social network in my business organization as well as a dense social network in my business organization. And that's why we build organizations, right? So that we can take advantage of human capabilities that are different than our own. That's why we organize as humans, and that's why we've organized since the beginning of time with our species. Now, while we're on the topic of sparse versus dense social networks, there's this phenomenon called structural holes. And that's where you have two clumps of people that, let's say, all kind of know one another, and they all know one another over here. But there is no social network connection between these two groups. That's called a structural hole. Now, a broker is that person who can come in and fill that structural hole. That person who knows a person or multiple people in this social group, but also knows a person or multiple people in the other social group. Now, why am I bringing this up? If you can identify structural holes and be that broker, that is business opportunity. We at Data Labs have created a lot of economic value off of this principle. One of the things that we do uniquely is when we work with a new science or technology company, we look at opportunities to scale them and internationalize them abroad. And the reason why we look for that is it can help them get revenue quickly. The reason why we're effective at that is that our team has strong social connections with people in various countries across the world. Most people that we work with do not have extensive and deep social network ties with people in other countries. That's a structural hole. And so because of that, we are able to generate sales revenue, supply chain development, and even investment opportunities for the startups we work with, because we are brokers between two social network groups that don't have linkages with each other. And that's why we were able to achieve last year in 2023, across 8 startup projects in our lab, we generated $716 million in new sales contracts because of this principle. And so I think it's an important principle to share with you guys. Now, to wrap up, I want to go over one more element of social network structure, and then I want to talk about reputation. The last element of social network structure that you need to think about is the diversity of your social network. More diverse social networks are also helpful at you being innovative and, again, having knowledge of novel business opportunities. When I talk about diversity, I mean diversity among a couple of different dimensions. There's diversity in race and ethnicity, diversity in gender, diversity in nationality, diversity in economic class, also diversity in age. In each of these metrics, when you have higher diversity in those, you're going to have a social network that helps you have more creativity, knowledge of novel business opportunities, and potentially a greater variety of resources to pull from, to bundle together in furthering your business enterprise. Now, you're probably used to hearing about diversity in terms of race and ethnicity, in terms of gender, and probably also in nationality, right? You want to know people from different countries. You want to have both male and female members in your social network, and you also want to have people with different race and ethnic backgrounds. You've probably heard less about diversity of economic class and diversity of age. Diversity of economic class. There is value in having social network connections with people from both a higher economic class than you, your own economic class, and also people from a lower economic class than you. There is a lot of opportunity at the bottom of the pyramid. Most people are there around the world, and their tastes and preferences represent large markets. But because they're at the bottom of the pyramid, we usually do not hear or think about those tastes and preferences and how we can develop novel products and services to support them, despite them representing a huge market. So you want to have social connections across the broad spectrum of economic class. Lastly, age. I promise you there are cool people to hang out with that are older than you by 10, 15, or 20, or 25, or even 30 years. There are cool people to hang out with your age, and there are cool people to hang out with younger than you. For me, part of the privilege of being a professor is that I get to be friends with people my own age. And since there are a lot of really old professors, I have work colleagues and friends that are 15, 20, 30 years older than me. And I love hanging out with them outside of work. Because I teach students and work with students in my lab, I also have real bona fide friends that are 10, 15 years younger than me. And I don't just mean I interact with them in a university work setting. We hang out outside of work, and that's been super useful. And so I want you to also think about diversity along those measures when you think about your social network. All right, wrapping up, and I know it's been a little long, but reputation. If you go back to the beginning, we were talking about how do you increase your social capital? And that means how do you increase your ability to get resource access and resource use from your social network. We talked about how one way to increase social capital is the structure of your social network. And we talked about several different pieces of social network structure: size, density, and diversity. We also talked about the principle of structural holes and brokers. The other piece of increasing your social capital is having a good reputation within your social network. If your reputation is bad, it doesn't matter if your structure of your social network avails you to social capital, you won't have it. Now, when I talk about reputation, I would focus on three things. You have a good reputation when you're generous to others, which means you give more than you expect back. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't get back as much as you give. My experience is that you're likely always to receive more than you give. The key is to give genuinely and generously. And you will give genuinely and generously if you come at it with the attitude of, I am willing to give more than I expect back. Because then you'll never be disappointed and you'll be more genuine in your giving. The other thing that I think is important with generosity is you don't need to hold it over a person's head. When you give to a person or a group of people, if they thank you once, you don't need to have them thank or recognize you for it again. Because the less that you're giving feels like a debt to others, the more generous they're going to be back to you. A second element of reputation that I think is important is integrity. Now, when I talk about integrity, that means, one, being honest, but it also means doing what you say you're going to do and doing it as closely to on time as you can. Now, I always know, trust me, I am the chief of setbacks. I think a lot of my team would say that. And so I don't think people expect you to always deliver on time. We're generous with each other. But if you can deliver high quality as close to on time as possible, that's a big part of integrity too. So when I say integrity, it's honesty and high quality and on-time delivery. The last piece of reputation is presence. Okay, so you're going to have a high reputation amongst people in your social network if you're there. And that means to me two fundamental things. One, that they notice that you're there in their life, either digitally or in person. So one thing our science shows about the structure of friendship, greater distance, it's just nature that you're going to interact with each other less. Even online, if we measure frequency of online interactions, physical distance is a predictor of how often you interact with each other online, which is kind of weird because we thought that social media meant the death of distance. Not so. Distance is as much a factor in the strength of a friendship as it always was. But knowing that, I found that I can be very conscious in making sure I circle back to people, even who live far away from me, and check in on them online. So you want to be present in terms of interaction and utilize digital technology to do that. But also when I say presence, I'm talking about that when you're with them, you're not phubbing them. And I don't know if that translates into Ukrainian. The word phubbing we use when you're just on your phone around people that you're supposed to be hanging out with in the real world. You need to be present when you're with people, not distracted. And the more you can be actually present with the people you're with, the better reputation you're going to have. So if you can be generous and present and have high integrity, you're going to have a high reputation in your social network. And that will allow you to have more social capital. So that's it. Thank you. I hope that this helps you think about how to leverage all three types of capital in the founding and growth of your business.